Okay, our first session today is hosted by Renee Kennedy, who is an accredited practicing dietitian and sports dietitian from Motivate Nutrition. This session is all about, you guessed it, nutrition. Even for adults, it's easy to get confused when it comes to health and nutrition. So for young athletes, it can be even more confusing. So in this session, Renee will explain how eating right can assist young athletes to optimize their performance on the court. But just a few things about how the Zoom will operate. We have muted everyone because there's so many people on. So if you do have any questions, please use the chat function and type them in, and we'll hopefully get to them at the end. Of course, if you don't want to be seen, you're welcome to turn your camera off. But I'll cross back over to you now, Renee. Thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just, if I go to share my screen, that should work. Can everyone see my screen okay? That's all right. Yep, thumbs up. Beautiful.
Yep, that's perfect.
Oh, lovely. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Everyone's hopefully awake and had some breakfast and good to go. What I want to try and do today is give you some even 1 or 2 tips that will enable you to boost your training and then go on to boost your game and your performance. And obviously everyone attending today is coming from different age groups and perhaps different levels of basketball. So hopefully what we talk about today, you can take for yourself regardless of what level you're playing at and whatever age you are. And so if you're here on your own or if you're here with your parents, hopefully write down some notes. Hopefully everyone's got their worksheet. The reason why we've got that is so that you can actually write something down and keep it and then take it on into your next season, because you'll probably find that, if we're hearing from some great speakers over the next couple of days, most of those professional players know these kind of strategies. They've put them into practice and that's helping them with their game. But there might just be a couple of little things to tidy up on. You might find when we go through today that you're actually doing quite a few things that I recommend for that, and that's fantastic. What you might find, there'd just be a couple of little things to try or to tidy up on, and hopefully it might answer some questions you might have. As Christy was saying, if there's something you're curious about or would like to just have a bit of a a question you'd like a bit more information on. We haven't got a lot of time to answer everyone's questions, but Christy will grab a few. So please make use of the chat box. There's not a problem for us to go through that. And so with regards to your worksheet, as we go through, there'll be certain times where we answer those questions. So don't worry, you're not supposed to have filled it out. If some people have had a go already, that's no problem at all. But as we go through, all those sections will become apparent as we go. All right, so at the end of the day, there's 4 things I want to cover today. Okay, 4 nice, easy tips that will put you in good practice for some sports nutrition for basketball. So the 4 things essentially are, number 1, healthy eating. Okay, we get that right as an absolute starting point. So that's number 1. Number 2, what are the ideal performance fuels? So people talk a lot about protein and carbohydrate and energy foods and this and that. Well, what do we actually need? So I want you to be able to know what that is for yourself. The third thing's around hydration. Now, hopefully, if you've been playing basketball for a while, your coaches, probably your parents, everyone will probably encourage you to make sure you have good hydration, good skills around making sure you're drinking enough water at training, playing, all those kind of things. So we're going to talk about how to navigate that. And then the last step is planning and prep. Super important, and we'll get to that at the very end. All right, so let's jump on in. Okay, so let's get my first slide. So I put this one on there just to remind people, why are we bothering? You probably think, yeah, we're pretty active. Yeah, we play, we have sport at school and we do this, that and the other. Why matter? As long as I eat, that's all that matters. Well, not really. We need to eat for good health as well. There's quite a few things in health that are based on how we eat. So for example, those things that are on the slide there, heart disease, osteoporosis affects our bones, obesity, diabetes, malnutrition, cancer. These are some things that are linked with our diet. Certainly there's some other components for those things as well, but if we eat well, we're at least reducing our risk for other health things. So part 1 is to keep you healthy, but secondly, it's really difficult to out-train a poor diet. So you might think to yourself, yeah, but I train so hard, it doesn't matter what I eat. right? A lot of junior athletes will say, yeah, as long as I just eat enough food, I'm cool. But if they could only just change that menu ever so slightly, they'll probably get even more out of them, right? They're such amazing athletes anyway. Once they change the quality of that fuel, they get more out of themselves. And we know that there's evidence for it. And all athletes training at a fairly elite level will tell you that. So we can't just sort of think we'll go and play it out if we not eating so well. So the reason why, oops, hang on a second. So the other reason why we're actually wanting to, for athletes, is to stay well. So if we eat well, hopefully we're getting good immunity factors and things like that. So you actually get to keep playing, right? It's really sad when people put all this effort into training and they get sick and run down and things like that, and they miss games, they miss trials and things like that. So if we're eating well and looking after yourself, then hopefully you're there to actually play the matches that you want to play. Obviously, COVID aside, we won't talk about the restrictions, but I'm talking about in actual regular seasons when you're playing and doing what you do, you don't want to be run down and sick and miss your matches. So that's one. The other thing is to actually have enough energy to go and play and to train. So that's why, another really important reason to eat well. And also to make sure that you're actually fueling your demands. Like a lot of you, obviously it might range. Some people might train once or twice a week. Some people might be training once or twice a day, depending on what level you're at. So you need to make sure that you're looking after that so that you enjoy the game you're playing and get the most out of yourself, whether it be for a game, competition day, gala days, etc. And some of you that might play sport outside of basketball, well, then we want to make sure that we, keep your energy topped up for all the other stuff that you do. Particularly all the juniors are still growing. We need to look out for that. Oops. So, and also too, just to watch our weight, okay, whether the top end or the bottom end of our weight spectrum, just making sure we're healthy for what we need, for our height and for our demand. So eating well will look after that side of it as well. And then, of course, we talked very briefly, and we'll go through more about avoiding dehydration. And at the end of the day, all those things I just spoke about, it's supposed to help boost your performance. And we know that as sports dietitians, we know that just by making a few tweaks here and there to athletes' diet, they do better. And as I said, and keep you healthy at the same time. All right, so remember, we've got 4 things we're going to run through. So tip number 1, healthy eating essentials. The reason why I say this is because people will say, oh, what supplement should I take? Oh, should I be having this or that? At the end of the day, if you don't have a solid foundation of just general healthy eating, there's no point. There's the little 1% or 2% that you might get from a supplement will not help if underneath you're not eating quite well. So, for example, you might have heard of the Australian Dietary Guidelines. Some of you, if you've done health topics at school and things like that, you may well have seen those kind of promotions around how much veggies to have, how much fruit to have, stuff like that. It's really good. That's for athletes too. It's not just for the general public. We should all eat that way. So if you've got a really good base to start with, then you can start getting, a bit more clever around what you do for your sport, but you've got to start with the basics. So for example, as I said, the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating is one, and also there's a plate model, which we show in a moment. So if you have a look on your worksheet, on the recommended serves per day, have a circle what you think. So for fruit and veg, and I'll just give you 30 seconds, how much fruit and veg do you think we should have? Like, is it how many serves per day? So is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? All right, just nice and quick, circle which one you think's right. So how much fruit are we supposed to have? How much veggies are we supposed to have? All right, so 30 seconds. Once you've done that, we'll go through the answer. All right, and because I can't ask anyone, I'll just go in. So basically the answer, I'll actually put on this side. No, I didn't put it on there. The answer is we're supposed to have at least 2 fruits per day, at least 5 veg. All right, so if people got that right, big thumbs up, okay? So about 2 serves of fruit and 5 serves of veggies. All right, so this is where it comes from. So you may well have seen a picture like this, as I said, at Health for School, or if you're doing any study, you might have come across this if you're doing health. So what's on there is really probably just a good basic overview of what we're supposed to be having. All right, so a good mix of protein foods, we've got dairy on there, or calcium-rich foods, some fruits and veggie and our whole grains, with the emphasis on water as the drink up on the top right. So water should be our key drink. Down the bottom, just small amounts of fats and having healthy fats. And then
Oh, Renee, you've been muted. Oh, there we go. You're unmuted again. We missed a little bit.
Not sure what happened there. Okay. And then down the bottom, probably it's muting because I'm talking about the junk foods down the bottom. That's probably
Quite
we don't want to hear, we don't want to hear that. Yeah, so it's that bottom part there. There are every now and again. So don't think that sports dietitians are the food cops, right? We're not going to say you can't have a treat, you can't have this or that. Of course you can, but that should not be the core of your diet. It should be, occasional foods, perhaps once or twice a week. And it might actually be built in quite strategically. So it might well be the, a meal that you have the night after a match or something like that. Like it might just be, built in quite purposely. So look, those foods are there every now and again. Okay, so, oops, I don't know why that's not letting me do that. Sorry about this, folks. I'm not sure what is happening to my screen. Why is it not letting me? Okay. All right. And so this is the other documents I was mentioning. So the healthy eating for children, that's where you'll have that 2 and 5 guideline on the other back page of it. And again, just limits our every now and again foods. But as I said, these are just core things we all need to do. So if you're, trying to get the fruit and veggies in per day, trying to have some lean protein and having the carbohydrate, the grainy foods. And in fact, that plate there, truthfully, is a really good starting point for at least 1 meal a day. So when you're having your dinner at night, for example, or maybe in your lunch, if you are trying to get those 3 components on your plate, you're doing pretty well. Like always having a protein, like a meat food, a carbohydrate food, and some veggie or salad. Like if you're always aiming to get those 3 things on your plate, that's a good foundation. And you might find you're a person that's really good and does the protein, the carb, but probably not so flash on the vegetables. All right, that might just be something you want to work on. At least try for 1 veg, even just 1, like something with a bit of green on it, or a bit of cucumber or tomato or whatever. But start small, right? Just start with 1 thing, put 1 veggie on, right? That's the start, isn't it? So that's sort of what we want to try and do. We want those 3 pieces of the puzzle as a healthy option. I've also attached this, hopefully if you've got your worksheet, you would have got this resource as well. This is such a good example of what the basics are. All right, so we've got to look after our energy. The balanced plate's on there again. All right, so I showed you the nice colourful one, but essentially that core plate, try and aim for that division, the protein, the carb and the veg. It's such a really good platform to use. Protein food, we're going to talk about them a bit later. We need them to support your growing and your sport. Okay, so there's 2 reasons why we need to use protein as we need to. Iron, I mean, as athletes, you're a bit more vulnerable, particularly even females, of having low iron. So trying to have some iron-rich foods each day, having some calcium for your bones, and the vitamin D. Well, obviously now with spring and everything, it's nice to be able to get the sunlight to help with that, and that helps your bones as well, and actually immunity. So a lot of the immune supplements that people see would have vitamin D in them. Hydration, I'm going to say that all the time. You're going to hate me saying hydration. I say it a lot, but it's so vital. That's why. And then staying cool. So in Australia, obviously it's warm, and you guys play a lot in indoor venues, of course, and there may or may not be air conditioned. So that can be pretty tough in regards to heat control. So that's where, again, strategically around your drinks, you might have cold drinks, which help. We know that they help cool athletes, having the drink colder. Sometimes little things like that might help. So all those kind of things. And the last little point there around supplement, that's why I want you to know about that. Most junior athletes don't need supplements unless you're low in something. So if you were low in iron, or if you had a vitamin deficiency that your GP had picked up from a blood test, then sure. And as dietitians, we work closely with athletes that have any medical situation. And actually, I probably should say this at this point now too. What we're talking about today is very general. If people do have medical conditions, if they have any nutrition related things they need to keep an eye on, so whether it be celiac or diabetes or any of those things, of course, you would be working with your dietitian or your doctors, and you might have some slight tweaks on what we say today, but the basics are still going to be the same. That we talk about. So yeah, just watch out. It's very tempting to think that a little supplement might do this or that, but at the end of the day, they may only offer 1 or 2%. You've got to get these underlying healthy eating strategies out first. Actually, sorry, I should have said on your worksheet around calcium. I'm not sure if people circled it or not, so we'll give you the answer now. It's at least 3 to 4 serves of calcium per day. So if you try and think to yourself, oh, okay, we might have a bit of milk in the morning and then none at all throughout the day, or you might not even have milk in the morning and have toast and not have any other calcium throughout the day, calcium might be something you need to put into your menu because you need it for your bones, and you're at the point where your bones are still going to get nice and strong until you're in your late teens, early 20s. So we want to make really good use of this time so you've got those strong bones to carry you. Okay. All right. So we've gone through step 1. All right. Step 2. Ideal performance fuel. This is probably the really nitty gritty of what you want to know. I put this slide up because carbs are always like a love-hate nutrient. People talk about them as being, oh, carbs are bad, you shouldn't eat them. And other people say, well, you've got to eat them. And so I find a lot of people confused, well, what's the point? What are we supposed to do? What I can say to you is carbohydrates are extremely important for athletes. They are our energy food. They are foods that your muscle likes to use. And if you look at all the different types of things we can use in our body, whether it be fats and proteins and things, we know that carbohydrates are super important for energy levels and how our muscles work. So the reason why I put this here, though, is that you'll still get lots of debate. So there's big movements around low carb, high fat diets and things like that for different sports. There is some place for some of those diets, so we're not writing them off, but they're not. Then they're very specific. So generally for most, especially team sports, so we're talking about basketball, soccer, all sorts of other team sports, carbohydrates are really key because you are doing back-to-back trainings and games, and we know it works really well. So I don't want you to be thinking, a low carb. The only time when we might have a low carb diet might be on a day when you're not training as much, or it might be, but you're modifying everything that day anyway. So, we don't encourage low carb. It just doesn't, you end up working against you. And there's a really great study that they did down at the AIS on Olympic walkers. And they said, well, okay, let's try it out. Let's give them the low carb, high fat diet, and let's see how they went. And in actual fact, it ended up blunting their performance at the very end. They didn't have that extra bit of boost to get the job done. And actually it ended up having a detraining effect. So we would not want you to do that. Okay. We want you to have your full energy as you need it. So the reason why I put this on here is while we had that nice big circle and having your fruit and veg and your meat and your grains and this, that, and the other, we tend to actually talk about food in this way: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. We sort of us dietitians talk about food in this way. The carbohydrates, I've just said before, are super essential, and we'll talk about why in a sec. Proteins are also very important. Okay, they're important for growing, but they're super important as a recovery fuel and also to help repair. But athletes are very vulnerable to having too much. That the idea of, well, you eat more protein, you get more muscle, and this and that doesn't always work that way. We'll talk about why in a sec. And then fats, and fats are really important too, but we've got to watch when we have them. Okay, so people might have some fat, and that's why that high fat movement's a problem. I've had an athlete once who was having a whole stack of avocado and things just before they were training, and that fat sits a bit heavy in your tummy, and they just ended up not training as well. So avocados are great, but they're not going to help you just before you're about to go and play or train, right? You have them later, but the way that fat leaves our tummy, it takes a bit longer and it sits a bit heavier. So, high fat foods just before training and playing, not encouraged. Certainly throughout the day in small quantities to support our health, 100%. So we need to watch out. That's why I'm saying watch out what you're doing pre-training. And obviously the type of fat's really important, choosing those really great plant-based fats, more healthier choices for us. And then, of course, water and fluid. So we're going to go through that anyway. Okay, so let's get your brains going. What sort of things are carbohydrate foods? So out of that list there, if you could please circle out of that list, which ones do you think are the carbs? All right, so I'll give you about 30 seconds. And see what you think. So out of that little list there, we've got apples, milk, chicken, broccoli, eggs, yogurt, oats, and rice. No cheating, all right? All right, let's go. Here are the answers. How'd you go, people? So if we have a look, most people would go, yep, the oats and the rice, perhaps. Might not realise that yogurt is. Might not have even realised that milk or apple is. So fruits are carbs, all right? They're really good quality carbs. They've got fibre, they've got vitamins and minerals and things like that in them. So when we say, top up your carbs throughout the day, you might well be doing it by having some fruit throughout the day. So carbs doesn't have to be pasta and rice. That's traditionally what people assume that carbs are, or bread. And so yes, they are. but yogurt is as well. So yogurt's a really great food because it's got a bit of both in it. So anyway, so I want you to know that, and milk is a carb as well. So, you know, having a breakfast where you've got some cereal and some milk, you know, that's a really good quality carbohydrate type breakfast. And of course, rice, so most people know that. All right, so I'm just showing you this. So when I've asked different athletes from different sports, I think this might have been swimmers or might be netballers. I'm not sure who this one was from. What's really interesting is that no one knew that milk was, right? But it might surprise people because they just sort of thought they're not really sure where milk goes. They might think it's more of a protein food, and it does have protein, but it's got more carb in it than protein. So that's why we have it there. On that particular one, people got a bit confused. A couple of people said that chicken was a carb, but most people, I had a different question. I had pasta, but it's just interesting. People don't realize milk is. So yeah, it's a good carb to have. Okay, so just showing you the rest of what is a carb then, it's all this stuff. So most of the time when people, if you look at your main meals, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, hopefully you've got one of them there at all those mains. All right, so as long as you have, that's a really good way, at least at every main meal, have a carb there. At least then you know, you without even thinking about it, you're topping up. So, and that might depend on what the meal is, whether it's bread, a type thing, and bread of all different types, white, brown, grain, are all in this category. Sushi rice, rice paper rolls, breakfast cereal bars, those kind of things. All right, so they're what we call the starchy carb, and these are what we call the natural sugars. So up the top, fruits and milks and yogurts and things, honey's in there as such, but it's, you know, watching the quantity is very rich in sugar. And then down the bottom, we've got what they call the refined sugars. So technically they're a carb, but they're just an every now and again. They're not going to be something we have all the time. And actually in that group, I would actually have sports drinks in that group as well, and gels. They're like a carbohydrate, but very refined. Now they may have a role. In your sport, you may or may not ever have to worry about using gels. You might find sports drinks that are a better option if you need a quick carbohydrate, because you get the benefit of two things. You're getting hydrated and you're getting a bit of carb at the same time. So you get a really good balance there. So as I said earlier on, the reason why we say, you know, we should have carbs and top them up is your muscle loves them and it works very well on them. So that's why we need them. And you tend to find if you underdo your carbs, you might be okay the first sort of 10, 15 minutes of your training, but then toward the end, you're lagging and you're really tired, especially if you've had a whole day of work or school, and then you've got to come home, quickly grab your stuff, off to go to training. You're sort of like, yeah, a bit ho-hum and not really at your full energy. And so therefore, you're not going to get all those great adaptations and the, you know, those skills that you're doing. So whether it's a skill session or it's more cardio-based or whatever your coaches are doing, you know, not having enough energy means you're not going to get the full result of that training session. And obviously with your sport, you know, the skill and the motor function, so our brain is affected by our carbohydrate too, so you want to make sure that, you know, all those focus elements are looked after as well, not just your fitness, and carbohydrates have a role with that too. All right, so then, okay, we know that, all right, include a carb at every main, that's a start, but what about snacks? So all these things here are great snacks. Now you might strategically pick something that's more low fiber or a little bit more refined when it's just before a match. So, you know, the really grainy bread, for example, might be a breakfast on a day where you're training in the afternoon. But if you're actually going to play a match and you're just going to have some toast on the way out to playing, you might purposely have white bread because the heavy bread might sit too much. So sometimes you might plus or minus the fiber of the food you're having so that it sits better. And honestly, try these things out in training so you know what works. And then that way, when you're playing a gala day or you've got back-to-back matches, you know, well, all right, in the afternoon before I train, I know that bananas work well, or, you know, whatever that might be. So then when you're playing, you know, okay, cool, on that day I'm having bananas with me because I know they work. So use your training and work out what feels nice on those days. So then when you've got back-to-back matches and you need fuel, you know what your body has. And if you speak to a lot of athletes, they know they're almost a bit sort of like they have their rituals around their games. They have their set breakfast, they have their set snacks, and that they know because they get the best out of themselves that way. So this is just an example of, well, what do we do with carbs? You know, what should we have, low or high, like we said before? The only time you ever need to have a lower amount is if you're not training or if you're in recovery, if you're injured. Otherwise, you need to keep going. And if you're actually doing double sports or you're quite elite and you're training daily, you should just be having them all the time. There's not even a time to really cut down on them. All right, so moving on to the next fuel, proteins. I'll give you just 10 seconds. So we'll start the flash round so we don't run out of time. Quickly circle the protein. So what we have, tofu, banana, yogurt, beef, spinach, fish, mushroom, and cheese. Quickly circle the proteins. All right. Okay, as I said, it's a speed round, so I'm going to give you the answers quick. And so see how you went. All right. Hopefully people might have known as a starting point beef. Okay, so red meat. Chicken would be in that group as well. Tofu, if you're vegetarian or vegan and you need a protein source. Cheese is in there too. So people don't realize cheese has protein in it. Okay, so it depends on what cheese is. Obviously, it's a source of fat as well, but it actually does have a bit of protein in it. Fish is in that group. And also yogurt. So yogurt's back. Now, the yogurt that's going to be in this group is probably more of the Greek yogurts and the high protein yogurts. So, for example, Chobani and YoPro, and YoPro has an even higher protein product now called Proform, I think the name of it. It's a good product. It's got like 20 grams of protein, which is the equivalent of about 3 eggs worth of protein. It's pretty high. And that therefore those kind of things are great. So you don't need protein supplements and powders and things like that. Sometimes you can get some really great quantities of protein in some of these yogurts. So that's great. So hopefully you picked a few of those. Again, when I did a survey, a lot of people didn't realize fish was protein, or this particular group weren't sure. They knew about chicken, they knew about egg, but they didn't realize tofu. And that might be some people don't eat tofu, so it doesn't bother them. So the reason why we talk about protein, it's super important for growth, but also recovery. So that's where protein will come into it. So having a whole lot of protein before you play, even in your mind, it might seem logical for your muscle. It's not going to help you as much as it's going to help you at the end of it. So it's more of a recovery and repair food. And that's why we strategically use it as a recovery. How much do you need? Roughly no more than 2 grams per kilo body weight. All right. So people that are chugging down on, a whole stack of egg whites in a milkshake and things like that, you don't need to do that. You're probably getting enough. So for example, a 60-kilo athlete only needs about 120 grams a day. So what does that look like? Glass of milk's got about 8 or 10. So by the time you have a couple of glasses of milk, you might have some chicken at one of your meals. One of those yogurts I mentioned, 15 or up to even ones up to 20. Before you realize it, you can easily get up around 80 or 100 if you're having some purposely placed protein food. So just gives you something to go off. And you might find that you're not even aware of how much protein you're having. So, and one thing I'd encourage you to do, and I say this at the end, keep a food diary for a week. It's a really good exercise because you can kind of look at what you're having, because unless you're thinking about it, we just get up and we just eat. We just go, yeah. I mean, some people are very methodical and they do the same thing, but, just for the exercise of it, keep a food diary, and then you can actually go, oh, hang on, I don't need enough protein, or I'm not having enough carbs. I don't need any carbs at this meal. Do it for yourself, because then you can actually know where you need to target. Very quickly around protein, we do want to be careful we don't overdo it, because we want to watch our cholesterol and things like that. And that's where our concern as dietitians, people doing keto diet, where it's like stacks of meat and fatty meats and things like that. We absolutely see the result with people's bloods for cholesterol. So, be careful when it comes to things like that, and watching out for your kidneys and so forth. Although good amounts of protein are still okay for kidneys. There was an initial worry, but it seems to be fine as long as we're not going above that 2 grams. And as I said, watch out for protein powders. So that's a nice little summary of what we need to do for our training field. So before we play or train, we want to go mainly with carb. A little bit of protein's okay, but not overly high in fat or fiber. That's what I'm talking like in the hour before you're about to play or train. Now that also might be for you, if you're a person that gets up really early and trains first thing, this could be the meal the night before, perhaps. The next time round, during the game, you might not need anything. All right, so depending on how long you're playing for, and obviously like subbing and things like that, you might not need any carb during the match, especially if you're well fueled. Obviously water, of course, but if things are going more than an hour, so if you had a couple of games, then in between the games, then sure, you might need just a bit, but it would just be carbohydrate. It wouldn't be anything else. And then after the match, that's when we need the carb and protein combo. All right, the two things together are going to help your body repair and recover, and of course, rehydrate. Ideally, that's within half an hour from when you're finished, okay? Sometimes that might be going home and having dinner, or it could be you've got lunch straight after, so you might not even have to take anything extra. All right, so very quickly on your sheet there, we've got our last little question to ask yourself. When do you take water? When are you having your water bottle with you? So hopefully your coaches have encouraged you to have it during training and so forth, but have a think about, like, realistically, when are you purposely drinking? All right, circle those. Now, this was for, I gave this survey to some soccer players. And what was excellent is that, you know, they said any sport or fitness. So some of these players were doing other sports as well. But the worry was that only 50% had it on their soccer game day. And I think their coach was very cranky when he saw those statistics. But then he's saying that there was at least more than half the people would have it for training, and then, you know, a little bit less on a school day. But really, they should be in all those times, right? So don't just sort of, and especially now you're at home on school holidays and so forth, like it's actually still fine to have a water bottle. Fill it up at the beginning of the day. You should absolutely smash it out by at least lunchtime, if not the afternoon. So just keep doing it. So the reason why is that dehydration is not great. Okay, there's these medical things like fatigue and gives headaches and things like that. But for you guys, for your sport, it's very important for the focus element. I put this slide on. It looks a bit gross. By the way, I don't work for Gatorade, just for the disclaimer here. It's just because I like this slide. If you are constantly going to the bathroom and that picture on the right is what it looks like, your kidneys are telling you you are not drinking enough water. All right, so the left-hand side, that's what you're aiming for. The clearer, the better. So when you wake up in the morning, sure, if it's a little bit dark, that's reasonable. Our kidneys are, you know, working overnight and so forth. But throughout the day, you're aiming for it to be as clear as possible. Okay, that's your kidneys' very clever way of telling you if you're drinking enough water. All right, so you know, how much water we need, it is very different. Everyone need a certain amount. Around about 2 liters is not a bad gauge, but yeah, that's something to keep in mind. So develop good drinking during training. Don't just go, oh yeah, I'll just take my bottle. I only drink on game days. Well, how do you know how much you're going to have? How do you know how to sip and just how much to have so you don't feel like your water's sloshing around with you on the court? So, you know, practice it. Practice how you sip. It really works. I'll just run through these. I know we're getting tight for time. Try and avoid fizzy drinks. Think about fizzy drinks, you drink them, you can't drink enough. So, you know, it actually sort of makes you, that's why sports drinks are purposely flat, so you can actually drink more of it. So just watch out. So having, you know, soft drinks and things, number one, they're too high in sugar and they actually can dehydrate you, but they're fizzy. So you're going to end up drinking less. So try and be careful with those things. Okay, yeah, and don't wait until game day to try your drinking strategy. All right, so we're going to very quickly finish up on this part because I think we have some great questions. So the last thing is planning and prep. Now, all that we just spoke about, and I'm sorry we're talking quickly, we're just trying to get a lot through. So if we've got all those three things, they're not going to work unless we plan. So the thing to think about is, you know, how much food you're supposed to have. It is very different. We're all different, male, female, the level you're playing at, the amount of training, things like that. So you need to adjust it for your needs. And it may well, your weight can always be a bit of a guide, your fitness, those kind of things can roughly give you a bit of an idea. But the thing is, you know, when you're playing and things like that, take your own stuff, unless there's somewhere nearby and it's a venue you play at and you know the foods and it's quite okay. But if you're playing away a lot, don't just rely on whatever's there. Take your own stuff. If you end up finding that you like something, well, sure, take it home. But, you know, be prepared, take your own thing. So then you've got your supply with you. Then when I was saying about training, again, plan. So if you know you've got like a massive session after school and you haven't got a chance to go home, you might just have to take more food with you on that day. Or if someone's picking you up, say, okay, can you bring me this or that? And I'll eat it in the car on the way. Like, you know, have a bit of planning around it, because it's one thing to say, yeah, I know I've got to eat that, but putting it into practice. So, and I was saying to you around training, have a real think about what you're eating and how it sits. So if you, for example, have a muesli bar or something before training and halfway through it, you feel a bit crampy or things like that, it might not be the right choice. It might have had too much fat in it, or might have had some grains that didn't agree. So maybe the next time round, choose a different one or different variety. And when you know what works, as I said, they're the kind of foods that you might actually take with you on, gala days or times where you need small snacks that you know fit well. So, you know, test it out. And that way you know what works for your body. And even on the night before, so if you've got early matches and you get a bit nervous and you're not a big breakfast eater before a morning game, make sure the night before you have a good carb dinner, like good carb, a good amount of lean protein. So that way, you know, at least your body's topped up. So that in the morning, if you're having a very light breakfast, you're still going to perform well. So sometimes it's the night before is what you're doing. So as I said, keep a food diary. Honestly, just for 1 week, it's a really good exercise and you probably get a lot out of it. That's just an example. There's one of those on our website. So if you ever want to go and get one off there, you feel free to get one. And I always put this slide up. Do not do anything new on race day. Okay, so don't or race day, game day, I meant to say. don't just turn up for like, the grand final or some massive match and go, oh yeah, I might just try this new snack or whatever, or it's got lots of energy. Someone told me it works really well. Don't do it. You don't even know if you like it, for one. And it's such an important match. Why would you do it? So don't be tempted. I put that there because sometimes, certainly with triathlons and other sports I'm involved in, there's lots of stalls and venues and things around that sell things, and people get a little bit excited, or they'll see a really great athlete eating something and go, well, they're eating that, I might eat that as well. Don't do it unless you've tried it. Okay, that's a huge tip that we always say to our athletes in sports nutrition. Nothing new on your game day. All right, so we're wrapping up. Okay, so hopefully you can take something away from the 4 essentials, whether it be just brushing up on your core diet, right? What you're actually eating. You might just have to, aim to have 1 fruit a day. If you're not eating any fruit right now, put 1 on your menu. That's a start. Focusing on fuel. So have a bit of a look around what you do before and after, and how that sits with yourself, and also your drinking strategies. And then to put all that into practice to make it work, you might find it's just the planning. You actually probably eat really well, but you haven't quite got it planned out. So there should be something in those 4 tips that you can try for yourself, because truthfully, a small bit of change and a bit of preparation can have such a great outcome. And so, as I said, nothing new on game day. Please don't do it to yourself. But certainly, if there's something you need more specific, like if you needed something specific, whether it be for a medical condition or you just want some advice just for yourself, sports dietitians do that. Okay, I'm one. And if you go on the Sports Dietitians Australia website, they've got a location section. So if you're not in New South Wales or in Sydney, we're all throughout Australia. So you can put postcodes in, and you can also look for dietitians that are sports specific or performance specific, whatever you're needing. So definitely a good resource, and there's heaps of really good fact sheets on there too. And actually you can subscribe to, I think, a newsletter where they talk about really topical sports nutrition. So if some of you are really keen to learn more, such a great website. Like, I really encourage you to go. And these are just some other ones. So there's a sports one, there's a dietitian one, AIS has got good stuff as well that you can probably find if you haven't already been there, NSWIS. There's heaps. And that sports science one down the bottom, brilliant too. He's a sports scientist, my sports scientist. So that's the one that had the food fight image. There's such good stuff on there as well. And that's just some stuff that we do in our practice. If you ever need any advice, if you have any coaches out there, or if you want to encourage your coach to have a session, there's some things that we do for our group presentations, but as we see clients one-on-one as well. So, all right, Christy, so I know we haven't got much time. Have you got
That's okay. Some fantastic information. Yeah, thank you so much, Renee. Wonderful information. We had a great question from Bailey. What are the best foods for building muscle?
Right, okay. So with regards to muscle, so protein itself will help us build muscle, or certainly repair our muscle as well. But to build muscle, you need 2 things. You need the the stress on the muscle, which is the exercise, and whether that be through the training that you're doing or if you're doing resistance work, and then the protein to help build it. And so they both work together. So for example, if someone ate a whole lot of protein without doing any strength training or any sort of physical demand on the muscle won't grow on its own just with protein. So it needs the 2 things together. So any of those great protein foods, so any lean meat, those high protein yogurts I was mentioning, even nuts have a bit of protein in them as well. So having those things and having them spread out throughout the day, that's one thing that we really know now about protein. It's not just a case of having, a massive steak at dinner and then forget about it. It's about having protein throughout the day. So you might try and have some at breakfast. It could be as easy as having an egg, and then always have some lean protein in your sandwich or roll or something you might have at lunch, and then having at dinner. So at each main meal, purposely having some protein, you're probably going to be in pretty good place to have enough to help support that muscle growth.
Just quickly, 2 things you could suggest to have before a game.
Okay, before a game, though, any of those carbohydrate snacks on there. So fruit's great, particularly things like bananas are very handy because you don't have to do anything. You just peel it and eat it. Also, too, having things like even just a sandwich with a bit of jam on it, or peanut butter on it, or something like that, like not an overly high fat spread, but something that makes it a bit enjoyable. So many of those kind of things are quite good. Or wrap, if you're not a bread fan, just have a wrap with a bit of spread.
Okay.
Yeah, any of those.
What are your thoughts on lollies or red frogs at halftime?
I should have probably made a big comment more about lollies. I've played team sport. I've played basketball and netball at different times, and I know what comes out of the halftime. So look, it just depends, because you know what, one snake is not going to be a big deal. It's when people get a bit excited and go, oh, I'm so low in energy, quick, I need a handful. That's probably going to work against you. So, you know, an equivalent of one snake, it's probably not going to set you back too much, especially if it's sometimes a little bit of a mindset around that's your booster and then off you go. But no, certainly too much sugar, it works against you. It actually dehydrates and it doesn't give you that quick carbohydrate because your blood sugars have a big snap up and then they crash that back down again.
I find that particularly too in a carnival situation where kids have three games in a day. They're onto their second game. They're having lollies at halftime. They're not going to make it through to that third game, are they?
No. Oh God, no. And that's why, like, I mean, honestly, something really nice. I said bananas example, but like grapes are really nice. They're sort of watery. You just have a handful of grapes. They're nice and sweet. I know.
What happened to the oranges at halftime? Remember we all used to have oranges?
I know. You know, but then you know what happened? The dentist got involved and said, "Oh no, they're too acidic. They're going to wreck your teeth." So that was where the big debate around oranges came from. But you know what? Melons are nice, like watermelon. You know, rock melons. I mean, melons are kind of nice because they're easy to eat. I mean, sometimes people actually really like little two fruits, you know, like, you know, diced tin fruits and things like that. They're soft. They rip the lid off, drink them down. That's actually quite okay. And they're soft. They're not high in fiber because sometimes people, if they're a bit vulnerable and have a bit of gut issues, they might find something like an apple or things with the fiber. It sits a bit too heavy. That's why I say something like bananas and also dried fruits sometimes a bit too heavy. So that's where some of those tin fruits work well.
Fantastic. Well, we don't have any more time, unfortunately, because we have to get off this Zoom session so the next one can start.
Okay.
So we have the I'm a Girl come and try for next session. So if everyone is ready to go for that, get your ball. You've got 15 minutes to grab a snack, a healthy snack, and a drink of water and get outside for the court. But thank you so much for your time, Renee. Really appreciate it. I as a mum and coach, also got a lot out of that. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you
for joining us today. Bye.